It was almost midnight when Jake finally got to the observatory. The old building sat on top of the hill like a lonely lighthouse, its dome pointing up at the stars. Most people thought he was crazy for spending so many nights up there. But Jake loved the quiet. No roommates playing loud music, no professors asking when his research would be done, just him and the endless sky. Jake was 28 and still working on his degree. While his friends were getting married and buying houses, he was stuck counting stars and writing papers about planets nobody could even see. His mom kept asking when he would get a real job, and honestly, sometimes he wondered the same thing. Tonight felt different, though. The air was crisp and clear, perfect for looking at space. Jake set up his equipment and started his usual routine. He always talked to himself while working. It helped him think better. Plus, there was nobody around to hear him anyway. "All right, telescope, let's see what you got for me tonight," he said, adjusting the controls. "Maybe we'll finally find something interesting instead of the same boring rocks floating around." The telescope hummed to life, and Jake began his work. He was supposed to be looking for new planets, but most nights he found nothing exciting. Just distant lights that might be something or might be nothing at all. His advisor kept pushing him to find results, but space didn't care about deadlines. "You know what's funny?" Jake said to the empty room. "I'm looking for life in space, and I can barely find life on Earth. At least aliens would probably be more interesting than the people in my department." He laughed at his own joke. That was something Jake did a lot, make jokes when things got tough. His classmates didn't always get his humor. They thought he was too sarcastic or weird, but making jokes helped him deal with the stress of school and the loneliness of spending so many nights alone. As Jake worked, he kept up his running commentary. "Oh, great! Another cloud rolling in. Thanks, weather. Really helping me out here." He adjusted the telescope again. "Maybe I should just tell my advisor I discovered a new planet. Call it Planet Give Me My Degree and call it a day." The hours passed slowly. Jake checked his phone. No messages, as usual. His few friends were probably out having fun while he was stuck on a hill talking to expensive equipment. Sometimes he wondered if he'd made the right choice with his life. But then he'd look up at the stars and remember why he loved this work. Around 2 a.m., something caught his eye. There was a light in the sky that didn't look right. It wasn't moving like a plane or satellite. It seemed to be getting bigger, like it was coming closer. Jake rubbed his eyes, thinking maybe he'd been staring through the telescope too long. "Okay, that's definitely not normal," he said, watching the light. "Unless the airport started landing planes in Farmer Brown's field." The light was definitely descending. Jake grabbed his binoculars for a better look. What he saw made him freeze. It wasn't shaped like any aircraft he'd ever seen. It was smooth and round, almost like a bubble floating down from the sky. "No way," Jake whispered. "This has got to be some kind of joke." The object landed silently in the field below the observatory. Jake's heart was racing. Part of him wanted to run, but a bigger part was curious. He'd spent years looking for signs of life in space. What if life had just come to him? He grabbed a flashlight and headed outside. The cool night air hit his face as he walked down the hill toward the field. With each step, he expected the whole thing to turn out to be some elaborate prank. Maybe his classmates had finally decided to get him back for all his sarcastic comments. As he got closer, Jake could see the object more clearly. It was definitely not from Earth. The surface seemed to glow softly, and there were no seams or joints like a regular aircraft would have. It just sat there peacefully, like it belonged in the middle of a cornfield. "Well, this is either the best prank ever, or I'm about to become the guy who makes first contact," Jake said to himself. "Either way, tomorrow's going to be interesting." Then something happened that made Jake's blood run cold. A section of the craft simply melted away, like a door made of light. And from inside, a figure stepped out. The being looked almost human. But something was different. The way they moved was too smooth, too graceful, like they were floating instead of walking. Jake stood frozen, not sure whether to run or stay. The figure seemed to notice him and started walking in his direction. Jake's mind raced. Should he call someone? Who would believe him? Should he take a picture? His phone was back at the observatory. "Okay, Jake," he said quietly to himself. "You wanted something exciting to happen in your life. Be careful what you wish for." As the figure got closer, Jake could see it was clearly not human, but not scary either. If anything, they seemed curious about him. Jake did what he always did when he was nervous. He started making jokes. "So, welcome to Earth," he called, out, his voice shaking slightly. "Sorry about the mess. We're still working on world peace and flying cars." The figure stopped and tilted their head like they were trying to understand what Jake had said. Then something amazing happened. They made a sound that Jake could only describe as laughter. That's when Jake knew his life was about to change forever. Jake stood there like a statue, watching this being walk toward him. His brain kept telling him to run, but his feet wouldn't move. The figure stopped about 10 feet away, and that's when Jake got his first good look. She looked like a young woman, maybe around his age, but everything about her seemed too perfect. Her skin had a soft glow like moonlight, and her eyes were larger than normal human eyes. Her hair moved like it was underwater, even though there was barely any wind. She wore clothes that looked like they were made of liquid silver. "Hello," she said, and her voice sounded like music. "I am called Zara." Jake's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Of all the things he'd imagined aliens might say, a simple hello wasn't one of them. Finally, his sense of humor kicked in. It always did when he was nervous. "Well, hi there, Zara," he said, trying to sound casual. "I'm Jake. Welcome to the middle of nowhere, Earth Edition. Population me and some very confused cows." Zara tilted, her head again, and that musical laugh came out. It was the most beautiful sound Jake had ever heard. She seemed genuinely delighted by what he'd said. "You make word patterns that create joy," she said, studying his face. "This is very interesting to me." Jake blinked. "Word patterns that create joy? You mean jokes?" "Jokes," Zara repeated, like she was tasting the word. "Yes, this is what my people have been studying. You do this naturally?" "Unfortunately, yes," Jake said with a nervous laugh. "It's gotten me in trouble more times than I can count. Most people think I'm weird or annoying." Zara's expression changed to something that looked like confusion. "But why would bringing joy be troublesome?" That question hit Jake harder than he expected. Nobody had ever asked him that before. Most people just told him to be more serious or stop making jokes at inappropriate times. "I guess because people think I'm not taking things seriously enough," Jake said slowly. "Like when my professor gives us impossible deadlines and I joke about needing a time machine, people think I'm being disrespectful. But you are showing that you understand the situation is difficult," Zara said. "You are sharing this understanding in a way that reduces negative feelings. This is advanced emotional intelligence." Jake stared at her. In 30 seconds, this alien had given him more insight into his own personality than years of therapy might have. "Emotional intelligence?" Jake repeated. "I always thought I was just being a smart mouth. May I ask you to explain this smart mouth?" Zara said, moving a little closer. "I am here to learn about human communication, especially the kind that creates connection through humor." Jake couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You're here to study comedy? That's your alien mission?" "Part of it, yes," Zara said. "My people. We have a problem. We have become very efficient, very logical. But we have lost something important. We no longer know how to find joy in difficult situations. We have been watching your television broadcasts, your internet, trying to understand how humans use humor to cope and connect. And you picked the worst possible teacher," Jake said, laughing. "I use humor to keep people away, not bring them closer." "But that is not what you are doing now," Zara pointed out. Right now, your humor is helping both of us feel less afraid. I was nervous about making contact with a human. Your jokes made me feel welcome. Jake thought about that. She was right. He had been terrified when she first appeared, but talking and joking had made the whole situation feel less scary. So your people sent you to Earth to learn how to be funny? Jake asked. To learn how to use humor for connection and healing, Zara corrected. My planet is very beautiful, very peaceful, but also very sad. We solve problems efficiently, but we have forgotten how to laugh at ourselves, how to find lightness in darkness. Trust. Me, I'm an expert at finding lightness in darkness, Jake said. It's pretty much my superpower. Well, that and staying up way too late looking at stars. This is why I was drawn to this location, Zara explained. I have been monitoring various humans, but your patterns were most interesting. You speak to yourself frequently, creating humor even when alone. This suggests the behavior is genuine, not performative. Jake felt his face turn red. You've been listening to me talk to myself? That's embarrassing. I must sound completely crazy. Not crazy, Zara said firmly. Creative, resilient. You transform frustration into amusement. You take lonely situations and make them entertaining. These are valuable skills that my people need to relearn. I never thought of it that way, Jake admitted. I always figured people just thought I was the weird guy who can't take anything seriously. Perhaps, Zara said, the problem is not that you cannot take things seriously. Perhaps the problem is that others have forgotten how to take joy seriously. That hit Jake right in the heart. He'd spent so many years feeling like there was something wrong with him, like his humor was a character flaw instead of a strength. You know what's funny? Jake said, and then caught himself. Well, I guess everything's funny to me, but I've been looking for intelligent life in space for years, and it turns out intelligent life was looking for someone like me. Zara's laugh was like silver bells in the wind. Yes. This is very amusing irony. You have been seeking connection across the universe, while I have traveled across the universe seeking the kind of connection you create naturally. Jake shook his head in amazement. This is definitely the weirdest night of my life, and considering I once got locked in the observatory with a family of raccoons, that's saying something. As Zara laughed again, Jake realized something incredible was happening. For the first time in his life, someone wasn't just tolerating his humor, they were genuinely appreciating it. And that someone had traveled across the galaxy to find exactly what he had to offer. Maybe being the funny guy wasn't such a bad thing after all. Over the next few weeks, Jake's life completely changed. Every night around midnight, he would head to the observatory, but not to study stars anymore. He was there to meet Zara. She would arrive in her strange craft, landing quietly in the same field, and they would spend hours talking. At first, Jake thought maybe he was going crazy. Maybe the stress of graduate school had finally broken his brain. But Zara was too real, too consistent. She remembered every conversation, asked follow-up questions about things he'd mentioned days before, and shared stories about her world that were too detailed to be hallucinations. Tell me about your planet, Jake said one night as they sat on the hill overlooking the field. What's it like there? Zara looked up at the stars, pointing to a spot in the sky that meant nothing to Jake, but everything to her. Beautiful, she said. We have cities that float among the clouds, waters that change color with our emotions, and music that grows like plants in gardens. That sounds amazing, Jake said. Like paradise. Perhaps, Zara said sadly. But paradise can be lonely when no one remembers how to laugh. Jake was starting to understand the problem. Zara's people had created a perfect society, but somewhere, along the way, they'd lost their sense of humor. They were efficient, peaceful, and logical, but they'd forgotten how to be happy. How did that happen? Jake asked. How do you just stop laughing? Slowly, Zara explained. We focused so much on solving problems and avoiding conflict that we began to see emotions as inefficient. Humor became seen as frivolous, unnecessary. Parents stopped telling jokes to their children. Friends stopped sharing amusing stories. After many generations, we simply forgot how. Jake tried to imagine a world without laughter. No comedy shows, no funny movies, no friends cracking jokes during hard times. It sounded horrible. But why do you think Earth humor can help? Jake asked. I mean, humans aren't exactly known for having everything figured out. That is exactly why, Zara said, turning to look at him. Humans face terrible problems: poverty, war, disease, death. Yet you still find ways to laugh. You make jokes about your struggles. You find humor in the darkest situations. This is not weakness. This is incredible strength. Jake had never thought about it that way. He'd always assumed his tendency to joke during tough times was just a defense mechanism, maybe even a character flaw. I joke when I'm scared or stressed because I don't know what else to do, Jake admitted. Like when my advisor tells me my research isn't good enough, I make jokes about becoming a professional stargazer for tourists. It's easier than admitting I'm worried about my future. But see how clever that is, Zara said excitedly. You take a situation that could crush your spirit and you transform it into something that makes you smile. You refuse to let fear control you completely. My people have forgotten how to do this. As the nights passed, Jake learned more about Zara's world. Her people lived for hundreds of years, had solved most diseases, and had created technology that seemed like magic. But they were dying inside from sadness and emptiness. We have everything we need to survive, Zara explained, but we have forgotten why survival matters. Life has become just a series of tasks to complete efficiently. Children are raised by educational programs. Adults work in perfect harmony but never share personal stories. Elders pass away quietly, alone, having contributed to society but never having truly connected with others. That's heartbreaking, Jake said, and he meant it. Despite all their advanced technology and perfect society, Zara's people had lost something essential: the ability to find joy in simply being alive. This is why I study you, Zara said. You work a job that pays very little, you struggle to pay your bills, your research may never lead to fame or fortune. Yet you find ways to be amused by your situation. You make jokes about eating instant noodles for the 5th day in a row. You laugh about your car making strange noises instead of despairing. You turn mundane frustrations into entertainment. Jake realized she was right. Just last week, when his ancient laptop crashed and deleted hours of work, his first reaction had been to joke about how the computer was staging a rebellion against boring research papers. Instead of screaming or crying, he'd made his roommate laugh with his dramatic reenactment of the computer uprising. I guess I never realized that was anything special, Jake said. It just seems normal to me. Normal to you? Impossible for us, Zara said. We would see a computer malfunction as a problem to solve efficiently. We would not see it as an opportunity for connection through shared amusement. Their conversations began to change Jake's perspective on his own life. Through Zara's eyes, his struggles weren't just obstacles to overcome. They were opportunities to practice resilience and creativity. His jokes weren't just nervous habits. They were tools for transforming difficult experiences into bearable ones. You know what's funny? Jake said one night. I've spent years feeling like I didn't fit in anywhere. Too serious for the party. Crowd, too silly for the academic crowd. But talking to you makes me realize that maybe not fitting in perfectly is actually a good thing. Explain this idea, Zara said, always eager to understand human thinking. Well, if I fit in perfectly, with my academic department, I'd probably be just as stressed and humorless as they are, Jake said. And if I fit in with people who only care about having fun, I'd probably never accomplish anything important. Being stuck in the middle means I can see both sides and find ways to bring lightness to serious situations. Zara nodded thoughtfully. You exist at the intersection of different worlds. This gives you perspective that people fully embedded in one world cannot have. Exactly, Jake said, getting excited. It's like being bilingual, but instead of speaking two languages, I speak both serious academic and finding everything hilarious. For the first time in years, Jake was starting to see his personality as a strength rather than a weakness. Zara's appreciation for his humor was teaching him to appreciate it too. He was learning that being different didn't mean being wrong. Sometimes it meant being exactly what the world needed. 3 months had passed since that first night in the field. Jake's entire world had changed, though nobody else knew it. During the day, he went to classes and worked on his research like always. But now he had a secret that made everything else seem less important. His friendship with Zara had become the best part of his life. She was curious about everything: how humans showed affection, why they cried at movies, what made them laugh until their stomachs hurt. Jake found himself explaining things he'd never really thought about before. "Why do humans enjoy stories where sad things happen?" Zara asked one night. They were sitting on their usual spot on the hill, watching her ship's soft glow in the distance. "You mean like tragic movies?" Jake thought for a moment. "I guess because it helps us process our own sad feelings. When we watch someone else go through hard times and come out okay, it gives us hope that we can too." "And you make jokes about these sad movies?" Jake laughed. "Oh yeah, all the time. I once made my roommate snort laugh during the saddest part of a romance movie. I whispered that the guy looked like he was constipated instead of heartbroken." Zara's musical laughter filled the night air. "You transform emotional pain into shared joy. This is exactly what my people need to remember." Over the weeks, Jake had noticed changes in himself. He was more confident in his classes, less worried about what people thought of his jokes. When his advisor criticized his research, instead of shrinking away, Jake found ways to address the concerns while keeping his spirits up. "You seem different lately," his roommate had commented. "More, I don't know, sure of yourself?" Jake couldn't explain that an alien friend had helped him realize his personality wasn't broken. So he just smiled and said, "Maybe I'm finally growing up." But tonight felt different. Zara seemed quieter than usual, more thoughtful. She kept looking up at the stars like she was searching for something. "Is everything okay?" Jake asked. "You seem distracted." Zara was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was sadder than he'd ever heard it. "Jake, there is something I must tell you. Something I have been avoiding because I did not want our time together to end." Jake's stomach dropped. He'd been dreading this conversation for weeks, sensing it was coming. "You have to go back, don't you?" "Yes," Zara said softly. "But it is more complicated than that." She turned to face him fully, her glowing eyes serious. "I have not been completely truthful about my mission here." Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cool night air. "What do you mean?" "I told you I was here to study human humor," Zara said. "That is true. But I did not tell you why." "It was so urgent." She stood up and walked a few steps away, her silver clothing catching the moonlight. "My people are not just sad, Jake. We are dying. Not physically, but spiritually. Our birth rates have dropped to almost nothing because we see no point in creating new life. Our elders are choosing to end their lives early because existence feels meaningless. We have created a perfect society, but it is a society where no one wants to live." Jake felt his heart breaking for her. "Zara, I'm so sorry. I had no idea it was that serious." "Our leaders sent me here as a last hope," Zara continued. "They believe that if we can learn to rediscover joy, laughter, and emotional connection, we might save our civilization. But if I return without a solution..." She trailed off. "What happens if you can't help them?" Jake asked, though he was afraid of the answer. "My people will likely choose extinction within the next few generations," Zara said simply. "We will fade away peacefully, efficiently, and without joy." Jake stood up and walked over to her. But you have learned about humor. You understand it now better than when you first arrived. I understand it intellectually, Zara said, but understanding and teaching are different things. How do I teach an entire civilization to laugh when they have forgotten what joy feels like? Jake thought about this problem. It was bigger than anything he'd ever considered. How do you bring back laughter to people who'd forgotten how to feel? Happiness? Maybe, Jake said slowly. You don't start with the whole civilization. Maybe you start small. What do you mean? Well, how did you learn to appreciate humor? Jake asked. You didn't read about it in a book or watch instructional videos. You experienced it. You spent time with someone who made you laugh naturally. Zara nodded. Yes, being with you showed me how humor creates connection and transforms difficult feelings into manageable ones. So maybe that's the answer, Jake said, getting excited. Maybe you need to bring that personal experience back to your world. Start with a few people who are willing to try something new. Show them what you've learned by sharing it, not just explaining it. But how can I share what I have learned without you there to demonstrate? Zara asked. You are the teacher in this situation. I am still the student. That's when Jake realized what she was really asking, and his heart stopped. Zara, are you asking me to come with you? She looked down at her hands. I know it is impossible. I know you have a life here, responsibilities, people who care about you. But Jake, you have shown me something my people desperately need to see. You have shown me that it is possible to find light in darkness, to create connection through laughter, to transform pain into hope. Jake stared at her, his mind racing. Leave Earth? Leave everything he knew? It was crazy, impossible, terrifying. But then he thought about what she'd told him. An entire civilization was dying from sadness. They had lost the ability to find joy in life itself, and somehow his stupid jokes and sarcastic comments might be able to help them remember what they'd forgotten. If I went with you, Jake said carefully, could I come back? I believe so, Zara said. Our technology allows for travel between worlds. But Jake, I cannot ask this of you. It would be dangerous, uncertain. You would be leaving behind everything. Familiar. Jake looked around at the hill, the observatory, the life he'd built here. It was a good life, but it was also a small life. He'd spent years looking up at the stars, wondering what was out there. Now, he had a chance to find out. More importantly, he had a chance to use his greatest strength, the humor that had always made him feel like an outsider, to help save an entire world of people who had forgotten how to be happy. Let me think about it, Jake said. This is the biggest decision of my life. Zara nodded. Of course, but Jake, whatever you decide, you have already given me more than you know. You have shown me that humor is not just entertainment. It is survival. It is hope. It is the thing that makes life worth living. As they sat there under the stars, Jake realized that his whole life had been leading to this moment. All those years of feeling different, of not fitting in, of using jokes to cope with loneliness, maybe it had all been preparation for something bigger than he'd ever imagined. Jake spent 3 sleepless days thinking about Zara's offer. He walked around campus like a zombie, barely able to focus on his classes or research. How do you make a decision that could change not just your life, but potentially save an entire civilization? He found himself looking at everything differently. The students rushing to class, the professors buried in their books, his roommates stressed about exams. Everyone was so focused on their immediate problems that they'd forgotten to find joy in the small moments. On the 3rd night, Jake made his decision. I can't go with you, he told Zara when she arrived. But not for the reasons you might think. Zara's face fell, but she nodded. I understand. It was too much to ask. No, wait, Jake said quickly. Let me explain. I realized something over the past few days. You said your people need to learn that humor isn't just entertainment. It's survival, hope, the thing that makes life worth living. But if I leave Earth to teach your people, I'm abandoning the people here who need the same lesson. Jake gestured toward the campus lights in the distance. Look around this place, Zara. Everyone's stressed, worried, competing with each other. They've forgotten how to laugh at themselves, how to find joy in the struggle. Sound familiar? Zara tilted her head, considering his words. You believe humans are facing a similar problem to my people? Maybe not as extreme, but yeah, Jake said. I see it every day. People so focused on success and efficiency that they've forgotten how to be happy. Students who are brilliant but miserable. Professors who know everything but have no joy in their work. So what are you proposing? Zara asked. Jake took a deep breath. I think I can help your people and mine at the same time, but I need you to teach me everything you've learned about how humor works, how it creates connection, how it transforms pain into hope, not just so I understand it, but so I can teach it to others. Over the next few weeks, their midnight meetings became intensive training sessions. Zara shared everything her observations had taught her about human humor, how it built bridges between people, how it helped process difficult emotions, how it created resilience in the face of hardship. Humor is like a universal language, Zara explained one night. It translates fear into courage, isolation into connection, despair into hope. But like any language, it must be practiced and shared to remain alive. Jake absorbed everything she taught him. He learned that his instinct to joke during hard times wasn't just a defense mechanism. It was a sophisticated emotional intelligence tool. He discovered that self-deprecating humor wasn't putting himself down, but showing others it was safe to be imperfect. When you make fun of your own mistakes, Zara observed, you give others permission to be human. This creates trust and connection. Armed with this new understanding, Jake started an experiment. He began a weekly comedy night at the university, but not the kind most people expected. Instead of just telling jokes, he created a space where people could share the funny side of their struggles. The first night, only 5 people showed up. Jake talked about the time he accidentally submitted his grocery list instead of his research proposal, and how his advisor's confused response had been the funniest email exchange of his academic career. The point isn't that failing is funny, Jake explained to the small audience. The point is that if we can laugh about our failures together, they become less scary. And if they're less scary, we're more willing to take risks, try new things, maybe even succeed. Word spread quickly. By the 4th week, the small classroom was packed. Students and even some professors came to share their stories of academic disasters, personal embarrassments, and life's unexpected curveballs. Jake watched in amazement as people who'd never spoken to each other before started connecting over shared experiences of imperfection. The stressed pre-med student bonded with the anxious graduate student over their mutual tendency to study so hard they forgot to eat. The lonely international student found friends by sharing funny stories about cultural misunderstandings. You're creating exactly what my people need, Zara told him after observing one of the sessions. A safe space where vulnerability becomes strength, where individual struggles become shared experiences. But Jake knew his time with Zara was running out. She'd been away from her planet for months, and her people were waiting for answers. I have an idea, Jake said during one of their last nights together. What if you don't go back alone? What do you mean? Zara asked. I can't leave Earth, but maybe I can send something with you, Jake said excitedly. What if we record some of these comedy sessions? Not just the jokes, but the whole experience. How people connect, how they support each other, how they transform their pain into something shared and manageable. Zara's eyes lit up. Yes, my people learn best through observation and experience. Seeing humans practice these skills would be much more effective than me simply describing them. They spent the next week recording everything. Jake interviewed participants about how the sessions had changed their perspectives. They captured moments of genuine connection, breakthrough laughter, and the transformation that happened when people stopped hiding their imperfections and started sharing them. "But there's one more thing," Jake said on Zara's last night. "I want to record a message for your people. Something personal." Jake looked directly into Zara's recording device and spoke from his heart. "Hi there. I know you don't know me, but your friend Zara has taught me so much about the importance of what you're trying to rediscover. I used to think my sense of humor was a character flaw, something that made me different and weird. But Zara showed me that finding joy in difficult situations isn't weakness. It's one of the strongest things we can do." He paused, thinking about everything he'd learned. Humor doesn't make problems go away, but it makes them bearable. It reminds us that we're not alone in our struggles. And most importantly, it helps us remember that life is still worth living, even when it's hard. As Zara prepared to leave, Jake felt a mix of sadness and excitement. He was losing his closest friend, but he was also sending her home with tools that might save her entire civilization. "Will I ever see you again?" Jake asked. "I hope so," Zara said. "If what we've learned together works, if my people begin to rediscover joy, maybe I can return to tell you about it." After Zara left, Jake threw himself into expanding what they'd started. The weekly comedy sessions grew into a campus-wide program. He started training other students to facilitate similar groups. He even convinced his advisor to let him write his thesis on humor as a tool for psychological resilience and social connection. Months later, Jake stood in front of a packed auditorium, presenting his research to an audience of psychologists, educators, and mental health professionals. As he shared the data showing reduced anxiety and increased social connection among participants in his program, he thought about Zara and hoped she was having similar success on her world. "In conclusion," Jake said, wrapping up his presentation, "we've discovered that humor isn't just entertainment. In the right context, it's therapy, education, and community building all rolled into one. It's a reminder that being human means being imperfect, and being imperfect means we're all in this together." The applause was thunderous. Later, during the reception, dozens of people approached Jake wanting to implement similar programs at their own institutions. As Jake drove home that night, he looked up at the stars and smiled. He'd started as a lonely graduate student making jokes to an empty observatory. Now he was helping people across the country discover the power of shared laughter and authentic connection. And somewhere out there, among those distant stars, he hoped an entire civilization was learning to laugh again too.